They told me the job would be simple: watch the cameras, walk the aisles, and make sure no one stole anything. I took pride in that. I showed up early, wore the cleanest uniform I could find, and treated every customer with respect. I knew people looked at security guards like furniture, part of the background. But I didn't mind. I believed that doing things right, showing up, and being kind would be enough. The first weeks were quiet. Some customers nodded politely. Others ignored me. A few smiled, and I always smiled back. I remembered what my mom said. "Your presence matters, even when people pretend it doesn't." I believed her. I stood tall, walked slowly, paid attention. Every shift, I felt like I was doing something good, something that kept the place safe. One day, I noticed a kid slipping a candy bar into his pocket. I didn't yell. I didn't shame him. I walked over and asked him to return it, then told him, "We all make mistakes. Just be honest next time." He nodded, embarrassed. I thought I handled it well. I thought I was proving I belonged here, that I was good at what I did. But all of that disappeared the day the woman started screaming. She yelled that someone stole her purse. I rushed over, called the manager, started checking the aisles. She was frantic, loud, and angry, and then she turned, pointed at me, and shouted, "You probably took it!" Everyone turned to look. Shoppers froze. The manager went pale. My ears rang. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. All I could do was stand there, heart pounding, thinking, "Wait, what?" That was the moment I realized the uniform wasn't enough. The politeness, the effort, the pride, none of it mattered. Not when your skin becomes the first thing people see. At first I thought it was a mistake. A woman in panic, flailing, pointing fingers because she couldn't think straight. But as she stared at me, eyes wide and furious, I realized, no, she meant it. She really thought I stole her purse. And worse, people around her started nodding, whispering, agreeing without even looking at me. One moment I was doing my job, the next I was on trial, surrounded by eyes that decided I was guilty before I could speak. The manager came over. I expected him to defend me. He didn't. He asked the woman if she was absolutely sure. She said yes. I tried to explain that I had been in the camera room. I hadn't even walked that side of the store until I heard the shouting. But the more I explained, the more I sounded like I was begging. The more I looked guilty. I could see it in their eyes. They were already rewriting the scene in their heads, placing me where I never was. Then came the worst part. The woman demanded they check my locker, my bag, my pockets. I froze. "Check the tapes," I said. "You'll see I wasn't near her." But the manager hesitated, then told me to follow him. We went to the back room. I was asked to empty everything. I stood there, being searched like a criminal, while my co-workers avoided eye contact. No one said a word in my defense. No one asked me if I was okay. They didn't find anything, of course, because there was nothing to find. But by then, it didn't matter. The damage was done. When I came back out, the woman was gone. Her purse was found, near the frozen section. Someone had picked it up and turned it in. She didn't even apologize. She just left. And the silence that followed was louder than her shouting had ever been. That night, I didn't go home feeling tired from work. I went home feeling dirty, like something had been taken from me. Not money, not pride, something deeper. Like my identity had been rewritten in front of me. I wasn't the guy who helped customers, who arrived early, who watched every aisle with care. I was just the black security guard who probably did it. I stared at myself in the mirror that night, looked into my own eyes, and for the first time in years, I didn't recognize what I saw. Not because I had changed, but because the world had made it clear what it really saw. And it wasn't me. It was a threat, a suspicion, a target. My phone buzzed. A message from my manager. "Let's talk tomorrow." I stared at it for a long time. I knew what it meant. I had done nothing wrong, but I was still the one they'd talk to, because racism doesn't need proof. It just needs a room full of people willing to stay quiet. And that's when it hit me. The accusation wasn't about a purse. It was never about the purse. It was about power, about someone needing to feel in control and choosing the easiest person to crush. I was easy. I was visible. I was vulnerable. And that made me guilty enough. I showed up to work an hour early the next day. Not because I was eager, but because I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing her face, the finger pointing, the manager's cold eyes, the silence from my coworkers. I thought maybe someone would have seen the security footage and cleared things up. Maybe someone would say, "Hey, we know you didn't do it." But no one said anything. No one even looked at me. I was told to go to the back office before my shift started. The manager was already there, sitting behind his desk, a paper coffee cup in one hand, the other scrolling his mouse. He didn't look up at first, just said, "Sit down." I did. My palms were sweating, my chest was tight. I felt like I was being summoned to the principal's office. Except this time, it wasn't about something I did. It was about something I looked like. He leaned forward and said, "Let's talk about yesterday." His tone was calm, but distant. Corporate calm, the kind that smiles while handing you the knife. "There was a situation with a customer," he continued, as if I'd somehow forgotten. "She felt uncomfortable." I asked, "Uncomfortable because I exist?" That was the wrong thing to say. His smile dropped. "Let's not get defensive," he said. Then came the real reason I was there. He said, "We have to think about customer experience, safety, optics." Optics. That word hit me harder than any accusation. He wasn't saying I did anything wrong. He was saying I looked like someone who might. And that was enough. "We're not accusing you of anything," he said. "We're just trying to avoid future misunderstandings." He offered me a cooling-off period. Told me maybe I should take a week or two. "For everyone's comfort," he added. Comfort. Whose comfort, exactly? Because I sure wasn't comfortable. I asked if they had reviewed the security footage. He hesitated. "It's being reviewed," he said vaguely. "But regardless of the footage, perception is reality." I nearly laughed. That was corporate speak for, even if you're innocent, you still lose. I told him I wasn't going anywhere, that I hadn't done anything wrong. His expression changed. Just a little. A twitch of annoyance, like I'd ruined his neat little plan. "We can't force you," he said. "But just so you know, this might affect your future here." Another warning, another subtle threat. I nodded, not because I agreed, but because I needed this job. Rent doesn't care if you've been falsely accused. He ended the meeting with a thin smile and a, "We'll keep in touch." I walked out of that office feeling smaller than I ever had before. Not because I had done anything wrong, but because I had been made to feel like I did. Like my skin, my face, my presence was a problem to be managed. I wanted to scream, to punch a wall, to cry, but I just clocked in. No one asked me how the meeting went. No one even looked up from their phones. I stood in the break room, surrounded by people who pretended not to see me. And I realized the real damage wasn't in being falsely accused. It was in being invisible when it happened. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, trying to process everything. I kept thinking about what the manager had said. Perception is reality. I thought about all the times I'd seen people follow me in stores, lock their car doors, cross the street. And I wondered, is that who I am to them? A threat? A walking warning sign? I remembered my mother telling me as a kid, "You have to work twice as hard to get half as far." I used to think she was exaggerating, that the world was changing. But that day proved her right. No matter how polite, how clean-cut, how hard-working I am, some people will only ever see my skin. And now I had to choose. Stay quiet, keep my job, and swallow the humiliation, or speak up and risk losing everything? It wasn't a fair choice. But fairness had nothing to do with it. So I decided I'd stay. For now. But I wouldn't forget. I wouldn't let this become normal. I wouldn't let their silence define me. Because if I didn't hold on to who I was, they would erase me completely. When I stepped out of that office and back onto the floor, the world felt different. Same aisles, same shelves, same bright, humming lights. But now every beep of a scanner, every creak of a shopping cart sounded sharper, like the store itself was watching me. I tried to act normal, smile, bag groceries, greet customers. But inside, something had cracked. No one mentioned the meeting. My coworkers glanced at me, then quickly away, like I was radioactive. One guy, Jason, who used to joke around with me, said nothing all day. Not even a nod. It was like I had a label on my back now. Be careful around him. Don't get involved. I wasn't a colleague anymore. I was a warning. I walked through the store like I was balancing on glass. Every customer that lingered near me, every kid that pointed, every purse pulled a little closer, it all stuck to me like tar. A woman dropped a can, and when I bent down to pick it up, she flinched. Flinched, as if I might take something. I handed her the can and smiled. She didn't smile back. At lunch, I sat in the break room alone. No one joined me. No one even looked at me. The microwave beeped over and over as someone forgot their food. I just sat there, holding my sandwich, too numb to eat. The room felt like a waiting room for judgment. Everyone waiting to see if I'd explode or break down. I did neither. I just sat still, swallowing every word I wanted to say. Later that afternoon, I saw the manager talking to another employee. They glanced my way, whispered, smiled, laughed. I felt like a joke they were telling behind my back, like I wasn't even there. That's the thing about these moments. They don't have to say you're guilty. They just have to stop treating you like a person. I started messing up little things, rang up the wrong price, dropped a bottle. A kid ran into me with a cart, and I barely noticed. My body was there, but my mind was somewhere else, running loops around everything I could have said in that office. Everything I didn't say. I wanted to ask the manager, "What do you want me to be? Quiet? Grateful? Gone?" The worst part wasn't the silence or the stares. It was the pretending. Pretending like nothing had changed. Like I hadn't just been accused. Like I wasn't being tested. I had to act normal to keep my job, but my normal had been stripped away. Every shift was a performance now. And I was acting for an audience that didn't want me to win. As the day dragged on, I started wondering, is this how it starts? The slow erasure. First, your name stops being mentioned. Then your smile gets ignored. Then your hours get cut. Until one day, you're just gone. Not fired, just replaced. Quietly. That night, I stayed after hours to restock shelves. I didn't have to. I volunteered. I thought maybe it would help. Maybe someone would notice. Look how hard-working he is. But no one did. I worked in silence, stocking cereal boxes and canned beans, while my back ached and my pride thinned out like cheap paper. When I finally stepped outside, the parking lot was empty. The cold hit me harder than usual. I looked up at the sky and thought about my dad. He used to tell me, "The world will never give you a break. You have to carve it out yourself." I didn't want to believe him. But maybe he was right. I got on the bus home, sat in the back, and stared at my reflection in the window. I didn't see a thief. I saw a man holding it together with both hands. A man who showed up, who did his job, who swallowed every insult because survival doesn't always leave room for pride. But that night, for the first time, I wondered, how many more insults can I swallow before something inside me disappears? I didn't sleep much. I kept thinking about quitting. But quitting wouldn't change anything. The next guy, maybe darker, maybe younger, would walk into the same store, wear the same uniform, and carry the same invisible target. That's what broke my heart the most. It wasn't just about me. It was about how normal this all felt. And somewhere between exhaustion and anger, I made a decision. I would keep showing up. But I wouldn't stay silent forever. It started with a beep at register 4. I wasn't even nearby. I was stacking water bottles near the entrance when I heard the buzz and saw a woman holding her receipt, waving it like a flag. I didn't think anything of it. But 10 minutes later, my name came over the intercom. They wanted me in the office again. I walked slower this time. Something inside me already knew. The assistant manager stood by the door, arms crossed. Next to him, the same security guard who looked through me last time. And sitting in the chair, the same woman from Register 4. She turned to me, face tight with accusation. "He walked past me," she said. "I saw him. He took something." I blinked. "Ma'am, I was by the entrance. I didn't even—" She interrupted. "You walked by. My purse was open. I turned around and something was gone." The manager didn't ask for proof. He didn't ask where I'd been. He just looked at me and said, "Can you empty your pockets, please?" My hands shook, not from guilt, but from shame. I pulled out my phone, my keys, my crumpled lunch receipt. The guard nodded. "That's all?" I nodded. "You sure?" That tone, that sharp suspicion, like I was one twitch away from proving them all right. I wanted to scream, but instead I said, "Yes, that's all." They told the woman they'd review the cameras. They let me go, for now. I walked out feeling like I'd left something behind. Not an item, but a piece of myself. My dignity, maybe, my faith in fairness, my belief that the first time was a mistake, because now it was a pattern, a target I couldn't peel off my skin. Back on the floor, it was worse than before. Word spreads fast in stores. Eyes followed me wherever I went. A girl at Register 3 avoided eye contact. A shelf stocker actually moved away when I started working the same aisle. No one said anything. But silence can be a sentence too. That night, I called my sister. I hadn't told her about the first time. I didn't want to worry her. But now it was too much. I told her everything. She was quiet for a long time, then said, "You should leave." But leave for what? This job wasn't just income. It was survival. It was rent. It was food. Walking away meant walking into nothing. I stayed up researching what to do. Could I report it? Would anyone care? I found articles about racial profiling in retail, testimonies from people like me, men and women who had been followed, accused, fired. And buried beneath the comments were always the same words: just don't steal. If you've got nothing to hide, why worry? They didn't understand. It's not about hiding. It's about being hunted. The next day, the manager called me in again. This time he said the cameras showed nothing. "You're cleared." No apology, no acknowledgement of what I'd been put through. Just a flat voice, like I was a line item on a spreadsheet. I stood there for a moment, waiting for something. Anything human. But he'd already turned back to his monitor. I walked out of that office and made a choice. I wasn't going to let them take more from me, so I started writing everything down. Every shift, every word, every look. I wrote about the woman, about the cameras, about the silence, not because I thought anyone would read it, but because I needed proof. Proof for myself that I wasn't crazy, that this was real. The guard gave me a side glance when I passed him. I held my head up. Not out of pride, but defiance. If they wanted to crush me, I would at least make it hard. I started doing my job louder, smiling bigger, saying hello to every customer like I dared them to doubt me. It was armor, thin but mine, thin. Still, every time a customer clutched their bag tighter, every time a child pointed, I felt the weight come back. It was exhausting, carrying your innocence like a shield all day, hoping someone sees it, fearing no one ever will. I started dreaming about it. Nightmares where I was trapped in the break room, where alarms kept going off, where managers grew taller, faces blank, voices echoing, "You don't belong." I'd wake up sweating, sometimes angry, sometimes numb. I thought about quitting again. But quitting started to feel like letting them win, like confirming what they believed all along, that people like me don't last, that we're disposable. I wanted to stay, not for the job, but for the principle, for the boy who might walk in one day and see someone like him behind the counter, not defeated, still standing. That's when I started planning, not just to leave, but to build, to speak, to share. If they were going to reduce me to a stereotype, I was going to turn that into a story. Mine. With my voice. My truth. I wasn't going to be their silence anymore. I quit on a Tuesday. It wasn't some dramatic moment. No yelling, no slamming of lockers. I just handed in my badge, folded my vest, and said, "Thank you." The manager barely looked up from his screen. The security guard didn't say a word. It felt like leaving a place where I was never fully there to begin with. But I took the uniform home. Not as a souvenir, not as some bitter trophy. I kept it because I wanted to remember. The fabric smelled like dust and floor cleaner. The name tag, still scratched, read my name like it belonged to someone else. But it was mine. And I needed to remind myself that I had survived something real, something most people wouldn't even see as a wound. I didn't have another job lined up. For the first time in months, I woke up with no shift to clock into. I stared at the ceiling for hours, wondering if I'd made a mistake, wondering if being right was worth being broke. I didn't feel brave. I felt broken. But deep down, I also felt free. The first thing I did was write everything down, every incident, every word. I printed screenshots of articles about racial profiling. I started a blog. Nothing fancy, just a simple page titled "The Man in the Uniform." I wrote my story in one sitting, and when I clicked publish, my hands were shaking, but my heart was still. At first, no one noticed. A few views, a few likes, but then someone shared it, then another. Then a message came in. "This happened to me too." Then another. "I work retail. I see this every day." Then one more. "Thank you for saying it." The comments piled up. Not with sympathy, but with solidarity. I wasn't alone anymore. I got invited to speak at a local community event. It wasn't huge, just a room with folding chairs and lukewarm coffee. But I stood up, told my story, and watched the room go still. People nodded. Some cried. One woman said, "I always wondered if this was real. Now I know it is. That moment meant more to me than any paycheck I'd ever earned." Eventually, someone from a local paper called. Then a podcast. Then a youth center asked me to run a workshop. Me. The guy who used to be afraid to empty his pockets in front of strangers. The guy who was once told he was Just hands, not a name. Now I had a voice, and people were listening. I never went back to retail. Not because I couldn't, but because I wouldn't. I refused to stand under fluorescent lights, apologizing for my skin, for my silence, for simply existing. I found work with a nonprofit that helps kids who've been through the system. I mentor young black boys. I tell them, you don't have to shrink to fit a place that doesn't see you. I tell them, you are not what they assume. I still have the uniform, folded neatly in the back of my closet. I take it out sometimes when I need to remind myself of what I left behind and what I carried with me. I look at that scratched name tag, the faded threads, the smell of bleach that never washed out. And I say to myself, you walked through that, and you didn't disappear. I'm not angry anymore. I'm not even sad. I'm focused, because my story is one of millions, and if telling it makes even one person feel less alone, less erased, then it's worth it. I was accused, I was profiled, I was broken, but I wasn't erased, and I'll never be silent again. There was a moment I didn't expect, not after everything. I was walking past a convenience store, same uniform folded in my backpack, same skin, same face that once looked like guilt to a dozen strangers. A boy walked out with his mother. He looked up at me and smiled. Just a small, shy smile. And I almost didn't know how to respond. Because for the first time, someone looked at me without suspicion. That moment made me think back to the mirror in the locker room, the one where I used to stare at myself before each shift. I remember the way I would straighten my vest, check for lint, practice my polite smile. All of it was armor, not to feel proud, but to feel safe. As if looking presentable could protect me from their eyes, their words, their fears. But it never did. Not really. I remember the worst day like a movie I've watched too many times. My body trembling, not from what I'd done, because I had done nothing, but from what they thought I was capable of. That walk from the manager's office to the exit felt longer than any street I've ever crossed. I thought everyone was staring. Some were, others weren't. But all I could feel was shame. Not because I was guilty, but because I had no power to fight back. But today I saw myself differently. I wasn't the kid begging to be believed anymore. I wasn't the invisible worker with eyes on the floor and fear in my breath. I was a man who had walked through hell and decided to speak, who turned silence into sentences, fear into fire. I stood up in front of people and told them the truth, even when my voice cracked, even when my hands shook, and they listened. Not because I was loud, but because the story was theirs too. I kept thinking about how many others are still living that same story, still apologizing for how they look, still walking through stores with their receipts clutched like passports, still trying to make themselves smaller in the face of judgment. I used to think I was weak because I didn't yell back, because I didn't fight. But I know now, survival takes strength too. And sometimes silence is the bravest scream there is. There's a fire that never really goes out, not after something like that. It dims, it flickers, but it stays. And when I see another black man being followed in a store, or a woman clenching her purse tighter as I walk by, I feel it burn. Not because I'm angry anymore, Bumsum, but because I remember, and because I refuse to forget. Sometimes people ask me why I still talk about it, why I don't move on, and I say, because I still see the same story playing out. Every day. I don't tell it for pity. I tell it so the next time someone like me is accused, maybe someone else will say, wait, are we sure? I tell it so one more person survives the humiliation and walks out still whole. Still human. I no longer wear the uniform, but I still carry what it taught me. That pain can shape you, but it doesn't define you. that dignity isn't something they can take unless you hand it over, that we are more than what they fear. I saw myself differently that day, and I'll never look back.